Ni hao. That's the best I can do. Before I get started, I'd like to say xie to our host, Wang Sheng Blockchain Labs, and to Symbion's investor, Finn Bushi, for inviting me to come back again this year to speak. I've been to blockchain conferences all over the world for the past 4 years, and I can tell you this is the best conference in the world. You should be proud to be here, and the presenters should be proud to participate. So for those of you who were expecting to hear me speak about compliant use of blockchain with governments and in financial markets, I apologize. I threw that away. Now I want to tell you the story of my adventure to get to this conference through the eyes of a blockchain CEO. So I put this together on the plane from the United States to Shanghai. Why did I do that? That's why. This is Hurricane Irma. Some of you may have heard of her. I certainly have. My house is right there. So all the very smart weather people in the world decided to say that the hurricane was going to go on the east side of Florida and everything was going to be fine. And then at the last minute, it didn't. And it went straight up the west coast. So I had to get on a plane, fly to Florida Friday night of last week, board my houses up in Florida, expecting to hop on a plane Saturday to fly back to New York so I could come to this fantastic conference. But instead, after I boarded my house up, and I woke up Saturday morning, United Airlines canceled my flight. They decided it was too risky to get me out of a Category 4 hurricane. It'd be better to leave me there. But I couldn't do that because I had to come here to speak to you. So what did I have to do? I had to change my flight to fly out of Atlanta, Georgia, which typically is a 6-hour drive from Florida. This is the traffic I was in as everyone was trying to escape. And as I was driving in this traffic in the close to 20 hours it took me to get to Georgia, I thought about this storm, and I thought about all the very interesting uses of blockchain and smart contract technology that our company Symbion is participating in, and that we're hearing about at this conference. And the more I looked around, the more I could see the future, and the more optimistic I got in the face of this horrible traffic and this terrible storm. We successfully, last year at Symbion, deployed a catastrophe swap with Allianz Insurance Company. Now, a catastrophe swap allows insurance companies to swap their risk out to reinsurers in order to limit the impact to the insurance payout for the insurance company. So as you can imagine, as this storm was bearing down on Florida, and after the previous storm had hit Texas, a lot of reinsurance swaps were going on. And the opportunity to have these done as a smart contract on a blockchain so you can rapidly ensure that the people are paid is going to be an amazing thing, and it's right around the corner, and it's there because of blockchain. And then as I was sitting in my rent-a-car, wondering if I was ever going to move, I started to think about some of the futurist ideas that have been tossed around about autonomous cars, and having autonomous cars on a blockchain, and having those cars communicate with one another without a third party, and potentially transfer payments to facilitate moving out of the way and let me pass you in traffic. That's a pretty exciting future, and I would have loved it here if I could have just paid people to get out of my way because I had to get to Atlanta. And while I was driving in one direction, all these brave people were driving into the storm. These are the heroes of catastrophes. Now, when you think about what does it take to organize all these people? What does it take to move water? What does it take to move boats, to save people after storms? It takes supply chain. And what have we heard a lot of today in this conference? The use of supply chain. So the idea of having a disaster recovery blockchain that has supply chain at its roots and the ability to know where all the equipment is, where it needs to go, how soon it will get there, How much better will recovery be after a catastrophic storm when that's the reality? Supply chain in business is interesting. Supply chain in saving people's lives is amazing. And I believe this is going to happen. And it's going to happen because of you here who are pushing this technology forward. And it's not about money. This is about humanity. This is the storm as it's hitting Miami. That used to be a street. There was a storm surge of over 10 feet in Miami, which means if you were on the second floor of the building, the water eventually got right to where you are. That's pretty scary. And as this is happening, flooding is occurring everywhere. Now, you can see the tops of some cars in this flood. When you think about what can happen with flooding and automobiles, insurance companies have to pay out for these automobiles that have been totaled. Now, there's a huge business in the United States, I'll call it a business, around taking cars that were in floods and were considered no longer usable, cleaning them up, going to another state, and getting a new title that doesn't mention that that car had been flooded, and selling it for market value. Now, at Symbiont, we're working with the state of Delaware to start to put vehicle identification numbers on the blockchain and create what we're calling an autobiography. Now, if these cars were on a blockchain and the insurance company pays and publishes that that had been totaled due to a flood, there is no place in the world you can take that car and get a clean title. And therefore, all the fraud in that particular industry is gone. So again, another amazing use of blockchain and smart contracts. This is the devastation of just some of the buildings in South Florida. The hurricane was so strong that it actually blew higher than a Category 5 in some areas, and it ripped even buildings that were prepared for a Category 5 to pieces. Now, I think after I speak, someone's going to come up and talk about insurance. And think about insurance in the context of this. With 2 storms hitting the United States in 2 weeks, insurance companies are going to have an extremely difficult time sending people out into the field to determine what was the damage and who do we pay. But if these are smart contracts on a blockchain, and if there's weather data and damage data published as an oracle, these can be paid out immediately, and those people in need who need the money right away, they can get it. They don't have to wait weeks or months to start to rebuild. The impact on people's lives is extraordinary when you apply technology in areas where you can help when bad things have happened. This boat used to be in the water. You can't even see where the water is, basically. It was brought over those trees and dropped onto the land. Now, what are we going to do with that boat? How are we going to deal with it? Again, the utilization of smart contracts and blockchain and the ability to identify this particular boat. Was it a houseboat? Is it a pleasure boat? How will it be paid for? Can it be rebuilt? These things are the types of projects that all of us are working on. And as we have our head down and we're thinking about the money we can save and the efficiencies we can create, I want you to pause and think about the humanitarian benefit of what you're doing, of what we're doing. It is truly amazing. You can measure the damage in dollars or in $100 billion is expected to be the cost. But what is the human cost? People still today, a week later, don't have electricity, no power. We've seen some great use cases on distributed power grids, alternative energy. Imagine if you were in one part of the state that didn't get affected and you had excess energy on a smart power grid, and you could go and find the person who needed that power desperately and transfer to them without a third party, not having to wait until some bureaucracy decides who and when gets to get their power turned on. Instead, the market can decide, and the blockchain can facilitate it. Without power, how do you get money? What if I need to buy food? I can't use my credit card. What if I don't have any cash? Again, in your pocket, with your phone, the ability to have money transferred to you, and you be able to transfer the money to vendors straight from your mobile phone. You can immediately feed your family. You can immediately find the money to rent the car to get you out of there. These are things that just simply are not possible without blockchain and smart contracts. We'll never know the impact beyond this projected $100 billion. But if you want to just look at the financial side of things, these costs could be shrunk dramatically because the time in which we can act would be much more quick. Also in the United States, when you have public works projects, the municipalities issue municipal bonds. Now, when we talk about financial markets, and that's really our sweet spot at Symbiont, we can now have municipal bonds created on the blockchain and in real time specific to address the exact areas that were affected by this terrible storm. And those payments can be made automatically. That's a powerful idea, especially when you integrate that with the government services and the ability for the capital markets to solve some of these problems and help rebuild. So I've changed my presentation from the compliant use of blockchain to the humanitarian blockchain. Because before this storm affected me, before I had to sit in all that traffic and try to get here to be with you, I had never given that a thought. I had always thought about what is the economic benefit of blockchain and smart contracts. How is it going to change how trade works? How will this evolve beyond the traditional use of trusted third parties? How can governments increase efficiency? But I believe now I will begin to start thinking about the use of blockchain in a different way. Not as much about numbers, not as much about math, not as much about what we can save or what we can make. Now I'm going to think about it more and how it impacts humanity, how it will make all our lives better. This is a dramatic case. You can see the catastrophe swap, weather oracles, autonomous cars that pay each other, emergency responder supply chain, property and title. When these things flood, if you have a paper title and it gets washed away, how do you prove you own what you own? That's not a problem if those titles are on a blockchain. Building permits, how can we quickly build things back? Again, it's going to be slow and bureaucratic, but if it was on a blockchain, it could be substantially faster. There's a morose thing to talk about. Lives were lost in this hurricane. Those lives that were lost, it will take some time for the beneficiaries of those life insurance policies to be paid. Now imagine if municipalities published death certificates on a blockchain, and you had a smart life insurance policy. And when that death certificate was published on the blockchain, that smart life insurance policy immediately paid out the beneficiaries. And now they have the money they need to help rebuild their lives, even though they've lost a loved one. The smart power grid, I believe, is going to be the wave of the future. I certainly believe money transfer is already here. But I want to challenge everyone in the audience to start to think about blockchain in a different way. Start to think about how you are impacting people's lives and be proud of that. And continue forward when things get tough and think about the lives you could save. Thank you.